Ask the Podcast Coach for February 28th, 2026.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it is Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Collison from TheAverageGuy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Always good to be with you. I didn't realize this till the other day, but my daughter classifies this haircut that I have right now as Saturday hair because I don't, I just wake up, come down here. That's kind of what that's.
It doesn't look bad though.
Well, but see how it kind of fluffs up there on the end.
Yeah, you got a little
Saturday hair is what you call it.
Yeah, all right. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, this is why I wear big giant headphones because number one, my hairline is starting much further back than it used to, and it is what it is.
I didn't know she was noticing a Saturday hair. Like it was, oh, Dad, you got the. She said something like, "You got the most Saturday hair going on right now," or something like that. And I was like, "Well, thank you."
Sounds like a band, ladies and gentlemen. Saturday hair with their new hit, Monday mornings coffee blues. I don't know, but
love it. Yes, for sure.
Well, the one thing that will make your hair stand up and pay attention, of course, is a good cup of coffee, and that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark. There it is, over at podcastbranding.co. The beautiful thing about Mark is not only is he an award-winning graphic artist that's made hundreds of artwork for people, he's a podcaster. And so you can go to him and say, look, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what my show's about. I kind of have this kind of vibe. It's fun and energetic or whatever it is. And let him do the marketing part. That's his strength. Let you do the podcasting part. He's going to give you a piece of artwork and it'll be like, wow. He'll actually give you a couple to choose from. You pick your favorite, or if you need him to tweak something, he is Canadian, so he's really easy to work with. He's very polite. And if you need a whole website, if you need a PDF, if you need a business cards are not easy to design. I just did one and I got done. I was like, I should have just hired Mark. This was dumb. He would have done a much better job and it would have been a lot quicker. But when there's, you want to look good, there's only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co.
Yeah, business cards are those things that you think you got right when you designed it yourself, and then other people start looking at it and they're like,
yeah.
Anyways, so big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. Where's my voice today?
I'm going to say you're Boston there. .cam.
.cam. Go to the market basket. If you haven't checked it out yet, the Manhattan Project in Oppenheimer is available now out there. And, of course, Dan always does a nice job. This is one of those areas we talk about design. Dan does just a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
He takes the album art from the original movie, then he makes his own version of it that's out there, and just does an amazing job with his art. So if you want a good example of that and art that does look good, you can check it out today. Based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, as always, thanks for the mug and thanks for your sponsorship.
There we go. And this came out today. Not today. This came out earlier this week.
Tuesday.
Yeah. Podcast leads AM/FM in spoken word listening, making a first. And so, according to this, Americans 13 plus spend their day with audio, and accounting of 25% of all day time spent with audio. You're listening to spoken word. And it said, this is out of the share of ear, which the one thing I've noticed since Edison Research got purchased, you can't find that report anywhere. You have to, and what's weird is I went to their website. I'm like, okay, how do I think you have to subscribe to it, which I thought it was, but I could not get the actual report. But it goes on to say, let's see. Edison Research is the only audio measurement source that captures how much time, not how many Americans, how much time Americans spend listening to spoken word audio sources, as well as the platforms they use to do so. And this week's insight focuses on a historic change on how Americans 13 plus listen to spoken word audio. And so what it basically means is back in, 2015, AM FM radio was 75% of the time for people, again, over age 13. 75% were on the radio, where a measly 10% were on podcasts. And then you go up, and we're looking at a graph right now, but you just see over time. What's weird is in 2020, so that's pandemic time, radio went from 60% to 50%. They dropped 10%, and podcasting grabbed 8%. So I don't know, I guess everybody was home and decided to play with their phone, or they couldn't find a radio. I know I finally bought a radio, but it's hard to find. If you want to go buy a radio, you can't go to Radio Shack anymore because, it's sorry guys, but, I know you were trying to get me they should have called it Battery Shack. They're just always trying to sell you something else. But it goes up, and then finally in 2025, podcasts 40% of the time, if you're listening to spoken word, is now spent on a podcast, and 39% of the time is spent with AM FM radio. And what's interesting about that, like I listen to the radio a little bit in the morning as a hate listen because I want to hear what visual thing the radio guy is doing in Cleveland. Rover's Morning Glory. Yeah. And I listen to it and just go, oh, that's so stupid. And so I wonder how much of this is actually on a radio and how much of this is on a stream, because again, how are you going to find a radio? I mean, I have back in the day.
Oh, there's still a lot of radios embedded in vehicles, right?
I forgot about it. I bought one of these. This was my first. This is a iRiver 799, if I remember right, model number. Wow. Yeah, there's something you haven't heard in a while. And I bought this because this was the first thing I listened to podcasts on. Yeah. And you would plug it in, it would turn into a little hard drive, and you had to drag and drop the MP3 files that had been downloaded overnight because, your bandwidth was ridiculously low. And you could actually plug a mic into this and record stuff. It was cool, but it does have an AM. I don't know if it has AM, but it definitely has an FM radio. So, but that's
well, it takes into account, right? Randy Black said this in the chat. Like, we have to remember this is spoken word content, right?
Right.
So we have seen a decline, in a drastic decline. I mean, if you think about from, let's just say the mid 90s till 2010, most of the spoken word content on radio was politically based, right? It was your Rush Limbaugh's or your, fill in the blank there, whoever that is. The local radio stations here then always had a local version of that. And talk radio, which is talk. I think podcasting has, for the most part, has replaced that style of content. Because the other day I was flipping through just the radio options, just like, hey, what's still on? What are they still doing out there, right? And it's not as much as it used to be. We just closed down last Friday our sports radio network. We had 2 sports stations here at Omaha. Mm-hmm. One of them just went off the air. They're like, we're done. Like, sports talk was pre-pandemic. Sports talk was everything. That's kind of moved to podcasting, right? From a listening standpoint. So when we think of spoken word, I think we're seeing a major transition in these spaces of it moving from, now it's met in the middle, right? And Ralph had said, can we trust this data? I think we can trust Edison. They do some good survey research out there, said from a Gallup guy. So, you can we trust that coming together? I think we can, right? I think what we've realized is in the spoken word space, those 2 mediums have now met. The real question would be, what about all the other things? Like when we think about music on the radio, what is that? Right? We're talking about that in chat too. What about the music? I think that's actually a bigger space than spoken word. Yeah. Right. So, and what about video? Like what are people watching TV versus YouTube or TV versus just streaming? You and I in the pre-show were talking kind of about the state of X and all the videos that are on there, but people are death scrolling through those as well. It looks like I locked up.
No, we're still here. At least you're still here. But anyway, speaking of X, I have, when I log in and I'm not me, So like I'll log in under the Podpage account on X, and it's just people beating the snot out of each other. And I was like, well, I'm like, why is this so horrible? I'm like, oh, because I'm not logged in as me, and I don't have lists. Like I have a list of my friends that I follow and things like that. Ralph says, I think we're seeing that because the hosts are making a better financial decision for themselves and owning it all instead of renting space on audio. Yeah, there are a lot of people over the years that a handful of people, maybe two hands full of people that used to pay radio stations, hundreds of dollars a week to be on the radio. And I'm like, you do know you can reach a global audience for like, $30 a month. And they're like, what? But some people still do that because if they're hyper local and too ego, they're like, no. Or if your audience is older, Adam Curry was talking about how when he was at the National Religious Broadcaster, there's a big push to save AM radio, like, because they're trying to pull it out of cars. And he's like, and he said he just went to them and said, look, guys, you're writing your customers right into heaven. Like those people are dying, 80-year-old people that are listening to the AM radio. And you mentioned sports talk. What was really weird, and this is an example of consistency gone wrong. I used to love Jim Rome. I would listen to Howard Stern in the morning, and I'd listen to Jim Rome in the afternoon. And it wasn't where to find Jim Rome. It was which station did you want to pick up Jim Rome on? Because he was on multiple ones. He was everywhere. And then he switched networks, and then he switched networks again. And so the other day I was driving, I had a flat tire. So I'd filled up my tire, and I'm trying to get to the tire place as quickly as possible. And I'm not really messing with my phone. I'm like, you know what? It's 2:00. Jim Rome is on somewhere. Not that I could find. It was really, I went through, and AM was either political talk, Jesus talk, or music from the 40s, like big band stuff. And I was like, wow, this is an interesting thing. But yeah, that was, if people can't find you, then you lose your audience. And I was like, I can't believe. And then I remember this was a while ago, and that's what made me think about it. Jim Rome had a TV show, and he was trying to do the TV show and the radio show at the same time. And this created this weird, because the advertising didn't line up. And so it seemed like he was going to commercial every 3 minutes. And sometimes it was for the TV clock. And then he'd come back, he'd do one little segment, and then they'd go to break on the radio, to where they would just show this weird Jim Rome logo, or it was just the dumbest thing ever. But yeah, don't think that more people, like if I said more people are listening to podcasts than radio right now, no, that's not true. But percentage wise of time, and that's when I was like, well, maybe because we're only listening to the radio for 8 minutes at a time, while I go to the dentist or while I drive to the grocery store or something like that.
Well, people in their car, right? I mean, absolutely, you're choosing podcasts because they can control the experience. Where, on AM radio or even FM, right? If you're going to listen to talk, again, this is talk radio, right?
Right.
If you're going to listen to talk, you take what they give you, and that's a terrible experience. This is why all the talk has moved to podcasting, and so you just don't. It's one of those kinds of things where you're like, yeah, of course I'm going to get in my car, and if I want to hear talk, I'm going to listen to a podcast. It's the most convenient way to get that done, for sure.
And they're talking about something that I want to hear, so that's even better. Randy brings up, I wonder if this study accounted for the 33 million folks that are subscribed to Sirius and not listening to AM FM. It could be. That's a difference,
Well, they went to the question was, when they did the survey, how much a percentage of your time is listened to talk for podcast, and how much time is listened to talk on radio. So if they considered that form radio, if that person did, then probably included. If they didn't, I wouldn't consider that to be radio, right? That's satellite. That's a different, they probably covered that somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yes, there's 33 million. I wonder how many, I don't know. I shouldn't say this. Who really listens to satellite? Like,
oh, that's seriously? A good one.
It seems to me, this is me. Now, this is my opinion, right? The views expressed in this moment are mine and mine only, right? But satellite radio seems just like a gimmick that you get for the first 3 months in your car, and then nobody subscribes to it. Now I know they are in some form or fashion, but I don't know. I don't like. When's the last time you heard some major story about it? Right. I know it was big years ago when it was first coming out, but anymore it seems like the end of a punchline. You know,
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, in the early days, it was great because you got to remember, radio is only as strong as its signal. So I remember if I drove someplace and I was listening to WMMS, which was the strongest signal here in Akron, Cleveland, eventually when you get, halfway to Columbus, you're not listening to WMMS anymore. And the cool thing about satellite was, hey, I got this station. I can drive across country and never lose it. And I'm like, okay. So to me, Sirius is kind of like the gateway drug to podcasts. You're like, hey, this is better than radio. And in the early days, it was ad-free. But then you discover podcasts and you're like, oh, you know what? I don't need a signal. It's on my phone. I downloaded it on my phone. I can listen wherever I want. And the next time I find some Wi-Fi, I'll download some more stuff unless I just want to chew up my bandwidth on my phone plan. So to me, it's kind of the way, because the only shows I listen to, the only reason right now to listen to satellite radio, at least from my chair, is Howard Stern. Because Howard Stern, and actually that's not true, because Howard puts his stuff out on YouTube. So if you just wait, you will get the best stuff. And here's the fun thing. They only put the best stuff on YouTube. Like the weird stuff where he's making fun of his staff or whatever. No, they don't put the news out with Robin, although I used to love that part. But I can still get Howard Stern on YouTube. And Eddie Trunk is another guy I would listen to who talked about a lot of like 80s rock and things like that. If I just wait 2 days, I'll get the exact same thing that came out on Monday on Wednesday. And like, is it worth $11? And then I have to tune in when he's on. Like, I got to be there at whatever, Thursdays at 2 to hear him talk about it. So there's podcasting to me is just like or satellite radio. And it was, it's again for people that don't know what podcasting is. Ralph says, was this a topic in NRB? I just heard Adam talk about how, as he was promoting his Godcaster program, that there are a lot of people that are still trying to make sure AM radio stays in cars. And he said in electric cars, AM radio is completely in fact, Randy says that AM radio doesn't work in electric vehicles. The frequency used for AM radio causes interference with the electronic system. So that's just not an option. And we're kind of politely trying to tell people, hey, you know what? There aren't 78 records anymore. And you know what else is going out? There's no more 8 tracks. Yeah, there's no more AM radio. Now, the problem you get into, and this is where ham radio comes into play, what if the internet goes down? Well, then now we've lost our way to communicate. So I get it, so everybody, hang on to an FM radio somewhere, because if there was something really, really bad going on, I could tune into FM, and I'm pretty sure if it was catastrophic, like get out of town. But the problem is there's a great documentary called Corporate.fm, and it talks about when Clinton kind of lightened up the rules of radio, and like all radio stations now are owned by like 2 or 3 companies. And he said many of them just went, hey, we've got 3 program directors, 3 news guys, and they're like, we just need 1. And so there was a thing in the documentary where there was like a train derailment and people needed to evacuate, and there was nobody at the radio station to say, hey, everybody, get out of Dodge, and so that's where, but how often does a train derail, and hopefully it's not too poisonous. I don't know. Luckily, the last really bad one was about 3 hours that way, and I don't think I got any of the
if it's Ohio, it's deadly. Right? All the deadly stuff goes through Ohio. So I don't know why that is. They do.
Yeah. Chris says AM radio here in San Diego is mainly Spanish. So
there's in Omaha too. I think that's pretty common. Those AM stations are getting abandoned. I think that would be my opinion. Again, I think they're getting abandoned for the most part, or just sold off. And of course, that's why religious broadcasting and the Spanish networks are picking them up to use them. they become fairly ineffective or fairly effective ways, low cost to communicate. For a while, that local AM, you could create your own. I think part of that Clinton stuff was you could do low power AM and FM in a market and do some things with that. You could kind of create your own radio station. The days of AM are coming to a close.
Yeah.
Right. It's terrible technology. Doesn't sound very good. Yeah. Can you do it? Yes. But the amount of stations and the quality of what's being done out there, at least, and there's some good stuff being done on AM, but it's just not reaching people for the most part. With the FM channels, I think we're probably predominant music is still a big player out there. But the same kind of deal. Why would I tune into a music station and just wait for the music to be played when the technology is pretty mainstream now to choose my own?
Yeah. One of my favorite stories is Paul Culligan had his young daughter with him, and she's like, "Oh, Daddy, you forgot your phone." And they were just going a short distance. He's like, "Ah, it's all right." He goes, "Well, we'll listen to the radio." And she said, "What's radio?" And he goes, "Oh, well, it's kind of like, your phone, except somebody else picks the music." And she looked at him and said, "Why would I listen to that?" Mm-hmm. And it was just the innocence of a child. You're like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. So I know I still have, I don't think I have a subscription, but it's tied into my woman from Amazon. And I'll walk in the kitchen and I'll say, "Hey, play Pandora." And right now, the last thing I listened to was a Judas Priest radio station. And I'm lucky enough, I think I get 5 skips a day where it'll play something that I've just heard per nauseum. I don't need to hear Hot Rockin' again. I'll be like, "Hey, skip." And it will occasionally, but I have it set up to play like the deep cuts, which is funny because it always starts off with like a top hit. And I'm like, no, deep cuts. So I could easily, and the advantage of that is I don't have to think about it. I'm like, "Hey, you pick. You're not too bad at picking." It's almost AI in a way, but I could just say, "Play, this song by this band on Spotify," and she'd do that too. We found out where Jim Rome is. He's all about streaming now, says Uncle Marv. He's on X and those Samsung channels. Yeah, there you go, Samsung. That's. I remember when podcasts were on Samsung. That was amazing. So, yeah. Let's see what else is going on.
Do you think he chased the money?
Yes.
I got that feeling, right? Just chasing the money to eventually, you're just you're gone. You chase it until you disappear. And I too, I listened to a lot of Jim Rome back in the day, and he's just not showing up anywhere anymore. Mm-hmm. He was everywhere. Now he's just not showing up anymore. And yeah, listen, it's his money. It's his voice. It's what he gets to do. He can do anything he wants. No judgment there. But it just doesn't seem like he's as popular as he once was, if that's the goal. Maybe that's not the goal. Maybe he made enough money and he was like, "I'm only going to do what I want, and and I'm going to work less hours and get more money, and that I'm fine with that."
Well, I know he started to own horses that were racing, and I went, "That guy's got some money." Like, those aren't, like, a horse in general isn't cheap. When it's one that you're betting on to race, I'm like, that's, he got paid somewhere. Chris from castahead.net, SiriusXM also has a companion app which provides replays, of many shows. They call them podcasts, but we all know, no RSS, no podcast. Randy says, SiriusXM is my backup for when I'm out of podcast. I always wait for the subscription to expire and get a discount to stay. Yeah. The one thing I hate about Sirius, because I would basically, I would use it to listen to Howard, and it's dawning on me as I talk about this. I haven't listened to satellite radio in about, a month and a half, because Howard went on yet another vacation because he's old, and I get that. But if you go to cancel, the last time I even said, "Look, I know you're going to offer me a discount. I know you're going to offer me to pause." I'm like, "I'm just here to tell you, we can save a lot of time. I'll be back. This is what I do, but I need to cancel my subscription, and I'm nothing you can say will get me to stay." And she has to read the script. And what if I offered you? No. And I'm like, okay. And I finally said, okay, let's go through it. no, no, no. And then they cancel. And then I'll go about 6 months and I'll be like, I wonder what Howard's up to. And so I'll resubscribe and it's back. And he's barely on anymore. And the thing I read in his last, which I'm sad to hear, his last contract that he signed up is he has provisions in there to be much more flexible with his schedule because his co-host, Robin Quivers, is once again battling cancer. And he's like, so it was really hard on her. And he's like, so, yeah. And then Dan brings up a good point because, satellite radio or just, long family trip, let's drive to Nashville. He goes, are road trips themselves as popular these days? Fewer road trips could mean fewer XM listeners. I don't think there are many, XM listeners on airplanes. Is it on airplanes? That's interesting. Conan has his own channel. Yeah, that seems to be the thing, is, and Dan says the irony of Dave saying he has to listen when he's on and when saying podcasting is where it's at. But this is a live show on Saturday morning at a specific time. It's a good point. And
well, but it's only part of the equation, right? We choose to record live because that's what works for us, right? And then it gets distributed. I know they know what they mean, but I'm just to be clear, right?
That's right.
There is
the
some
irony.
I guess. Yeah.
Ralph says, I love AM radio because the cool static sound that almost made it yeah. That's always, and you had to keep moving the dial just a little bit to see if you could tune it in before it was digital. Whatever happened to that? Remember, did you
the buttons you'd push? You'd set that was the you'd have 6 buttons. It was satisfying. It'd slide that thing over. I always tried to set them so they were the farthest possible apart when you were going down the line, so that thing would just rack back and forth in the dial. I wonder when we made the digital switch. What year do you think that was that we switched over? I think we bought a car in the 80s that was digital. So you think it was maybe in late 70s? Maybe
late 70s. But remember when there was, because you could listen, you bought these radios and there'd be like WMMS, 100.7, it was like the live channel. And then you could go to like version 2 and version 3. And you had to have this special radio to listen to the digital channels. And what was cool is the digital channels, were ad-free for the most part, and they played great music. I remember I had a car, I think I had a rental car, that I could pick these up on. I'm like, why isn't this, like, nobody's talking about this. This is really cool. And I'd be interested to see if that's even still in play, because it just didn't catch on because you had to buy a different kind of radio. And so you got to make it easy to find people. So keep that in mind. But that was the big news this week, and we all were like, yay, podcasting. So here's a fun one. This makes my brain hurt in a way. Wow, I'm looking at things today. I guess it's the cold medicine. I didn't start the Zoom meeting, and I was going to start it. Remember last week that kind of caused a weird issue. So I didn't, like, if we're doing chat only today. Okay. And then I went to put a marker on the Roadcaster. No, it's not recording. So we're just going to YouTube today. It's fine. I see people, it's weird because on one hand, I'm always telling people, hey, if you want to be on YouTube, but you don't have to be on YouTube. And then we got this guy, and he says, I'm really riding the struggling bus. I just came out with a new show, and I'm struggling with Spotify for creators. It barely works. Doesn't open on any of my computers, and it opens on the mobile app, but it won't let me upload more than the first episode. So I'm looking at a different distribution host. We do a long video episode, like 1 to 2.5 hours per episode. So I need something that will allow me to upload that big of a file that doesn't cost money at first. Oh, Jim, I wonder what he should do. And then he says, it's wild that only YouTube, it chill like that. I want to be on all platforms for listeners, but darn, is it a headache? And I just was like, dude, it's like, don't overthink it, YouTube. And I always just say, if I said to you, Jim, hey, have you seen that video with the gorilla riding a unicycle? Like, where would you go? Like, you're not going, YouTube. Yeah, you're not going to Spotify. You're not like, go, like, just, if you want to be on video,
There's anti-YouTube people, Dave. I have them, my listeners on Home Gadget Geeks. They were like, hey, can you give me a video feed? And I'm like, yeah, it's called YouTube. And like, I don't want to watch it on YouTube. I want it ad-free on my phone. And, that kind of forced me to go down a path of I make available a RSS feed for video that is large and small. And so based on and they actually get equal use, which is kind of crazy. They're down to about 40 or 50 views every single week. Every single week they're still getting hit, which is crazy to me. But there's some folks who that's the way they wanted to subscribe. They're getting downloaded. Like they wouldn't be showing up consistently every single week if they weren't getting downloaded. I use Mediafire for that feed.
Yeah.
But there's just some folks I'm like, yeah, have you ever heard of YouTube? Like, it's out there. It's got chapters. I don't do the chapters in the feed. Listen, I've been doing a video feed forever, probably 10 years. And I don't put chapters in there. I probably should, but I don't. But on YouTube, the chapter stuff is so easy, right? Just put it in the description. YouTube picks it up. So I still don't know why, but they say, I don't want to go to YouTube. Okay. I'll make
right.
I'm not going to say no to you. If you're asking for it, I'm going to get, and it's not too much trouble for me. I'm going to give you that the way you want it. And that didn't come out right. But that is, that's, I'm just gonna get there. But people, I too am perplexed. Like, who is watching this? But they are.
Yeah.
They are.
The other thing I did this week that I was like, why is this it always sounds like it's a giant mountain. I used, let's see, 3 platforms. So every Friday I do like group coaching. We all get together and answer each other's questions and kind of, catch up with each other. That's done in video. I do that via Zoom. I upload it to this tool called Tela, T-E-L-A. It's kind of like Loom on steroids. I use it for making videos and such. And what I love about it, it transcribes it and makes pretty decent chapters. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I put it in Tela. That goes to the School of Podcasting. I then export it out of Tela as an audio file. Now, unfortunately, they give me an M4A, right? Or whatever the Apple audio one that's not an MP3. I threw that into Hindenburg and said, hey, export that as an MP3. But Tela gives me those chapters with timestamps. So I uploaded it to Podchapters, Daniel's tool, podchapters.com. And I downloaded a transcript from Tela, threw it in there, and then said, hey, add chapters using my own outline. So I grabbed the chapters from Tela, threw it into Podchapters, and then downloaded the file, and that MP3 file now had my chapters. And I was like, when people talk about, I've got to use so many different things, I was like, yeah, it would have been cool if it was one tool, but like it wasn't like you were, shooting bamboo under my thumbnails. I was like, really wasn't that big of a deal to go from one. It took me all of, 10 minutes, if that. So yeah, I'm with Randy on this. He says, who is asking for HLS streaming on Apple? Advertisers. Yeah, that's kind of why I don't like that feature. I go, if it's made for advertisers, then we're going to open the door to more advertising. And yeah, Ralph says Apple's doing this to make money. They want some of that YouTube money. And to me, that's the one thing I liked about it, was that Apple's going to charge to put ads in your show. And I was like, well, good. Maybe now people will, quit putting ads that have nothing to do with me and maybe think about it. I don't know. Let's see. Daphne says YouTube won't allow adults to talk openly and express themselves. Too many accounts are removed for violation of terms of service. Well, yeah, depending, it's when you get into those talks that offend everybody. That's the one thing that I find weird is the local Akron radio station in the morning had a guy that could not be more left. His name was, no, I take that back. Howie was in the morning. Pretty central, but definitely leaned pretty right. And in the afternoon, you had Joe, who was way left. And it was kind of fun because you could hear different perspectives on the same news story. And now it's just all, they're all pretty right-leaning at this point. Todd says, I was excited at first about Apple and then realized that Apple video only was being used by 4 podcast hosts. Yeah, I'll be interested to see if that changes by the time this rolls out, which will be somewhere around March, which means it'll hit our phones somewhere around July or August. But I don't know. I just don't get it. Danny from Captivate, alternate enclosures is such an underused tag. It's easy to grab a YouTube video link and drop that in. It lets listeners and episodes based on their preference and no storage cost to worry about. I should do that with this show. Because you know what? I can't because this show's on Buzzsprout. It's my only show that's on Buzzsprout. I'm so used to, like, all my other shows are on Captivate except for one called, it's so popular, Best Podcast Gear is on Blueberry. Because I try, and I still have a show on Libsyn. And then Ralph says, the issue with YouTube is their community guidelines nonsense for many of us who don't fit the politically correct platform. Yeah, if you want to say those unpopular things, it gets a little sticky. That's why you have a lot of people, they'll do a half hour on YouTube and they'll go, if you want to hear the rest of the show, you got to follow us on Rumble. And so that gets a little weird, just to say the least. Yes, and people are asking about the In and Around podcasting show, and Danny says that LC Escobar and Rob will be taking over that and relaunching soon. So Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity to Podcast and Pod Chapters, I just shouted you out, buddy. The biggest advantage of HLS is you can have a single feed provide audio or video and at multiple resolutions depending on their bandwidth. So that's the big advantage. I just again go, but who's looking for that? Yeah, and Ralph says, but it's all about the advertising. We live in an advertised world. I also think Apple is going to charge for dynamic insertions in audio because I bet they pivot to HLS for everything. That would be interesting. That would cause a lot of people to be unhappy with Apple, though, if you change that. We'll see. But
who's happy with them now? Like, I think everybody's a love-hate, right?
Yeah.
But they do. I mean, it's so hard because they're so dictatorial in the way they treat their customers. But they're successful because they're dictatorial in some ways. They don't have all these crazy things happening on the platform. And in most cases, it works. What they do works, right? I mean, that's why they're as popular as they are. Yeah, you can disagree with them. That's many of you do, but the most of the population is head over heels at the moment. And will it always be that way? Maybe not. You know, will we go into a era where that's not true? Maybe. But for now, I mean, they're leading the way on this. And you know what? Yes, it's an advertising world, but it's always been an advertising world. Like, we complained before we had these, we complained about all the billboards on the interstate. We complained about all the paintings that were on the side of buildings. That's how they used to, right? Remember in the old days when they put up a building and on the side of the building were just big giant ads. Every building had an ad on the top of it. There's nothing new under the sun here, friends. This isn't a new, all of a sudden ads came out of nowhere.
Oh yeah.
Anytime you have a service like
sides of buses, inside buses.
Now ridiculous is the bus advertising these days, where it's a skin, right? They just the whole bus is covered, right? And some of those things. I mean, good God, go to a sports game, any one of them.
Oh yeah.
And count the number of times you are served up an ad in some form or fashion. Every inning has some kind of event that's sponsored by, You know,
Right.
such and such. We're doing such and such.
Oscar Mayer, they do a thing at the Cleveland game. It's been a tradition where mustard, ketchup, and I forget the other one. It might be a bun, and they all race. And you're who's going to win,
right.
ketchup or mustard or whatever. Brought to you by, of course, a hot dog company. You know, because they want you to buy a $7 hot dog. Steph wants to know what was the media program you mentioned?
Media Fire. Media, all one word, mediafire.com. Been around forever. I interviewed him on my show a decade or so ago, and you know, it's kind of back when large storage was still kind of specialized, and they do a pretty nice job. They also allow you to create a feed off of the storage that you purchase from them, and that's who I use, mediafire.com.
Yeah, Danny says, I can't see Apple charging for dynamic ad insertion in audio, to be honest. Out of the big three, Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, for me, they're the most podcaster-friendly and supporter of open RSS. Yeah, this is where, there you go. Daniel says, before you know it, people will be paying to sponsor a coffee pour. Yes.
And the mug, by the way. Let me just say, this is the, you know, hold on, let me get my thumb out of the way. There we go. Not that there's any advertising in this show at all.
Not at all. I need, you know, if I have a mug, it's just, you know, Horse Radio Network. So there you go. I've got, I was drinking my.
It's everywhere, friends. It's everywhere.
It is.
And it's always been everywhere. We've gotten more ways of, or it's different or being effective or whatever, but you know, it was, I'm locked up again. Shoot.
Are you? Because you're not on my side. You're fine. It's weird. Can you hear me? I don't think he can. He is locked up on his side.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You can hear me, yeah. So you're not locked up on our side, at least on my side.
I wonder what's going on here. Was I just staring at the screen and looking real there?
No, you were not locked up at all. You're like, oh crap, I'm locked up, and then you're sitting. I'm like, no, you're not. You're not.
Yeah, you're locked up. That's crazy. I finally got all the. I shouldn't say this. I did a show Thursday night, and we didn't have any issues with Restream. And I've had issues the last 4 or 5 or 6 weeks with things locking up. Something must be going. I always thought it was somebody else, but maybe it's me. Yeah. Anyways, the ads were everywhere before. Sides of buildings, on cars, in newspapers. Remember newspapers? Remember magazines?
Yeah.
Like, it's not a new thing, friends. It's not new. It's always been there.
Here's a fun question, and see if you can see what I think is really wrong with this question. Looking for ideas and advice. My roommate and myself are roughly sketching out a plan for a podcast about historical/folkloric mysteries. We have a limited budget, of course. There's always a limited budget, and this would be more of a hobby for us than something we intend to make money at. All right, that's good to know. Any advice on getting started and planning episodes would be appreciated. Also looking for episode topics. And that's the part that I went, wait, if you don't know what you're going to talk about, like everything else was good until they said, also, we have no idea what to talk about. I was like, yeah, that's maybe not start a podcast. For me, at least from my chair, the people that succeed at podcasting are the people that are like, I have to talk about this. This is something, it's been on my heart. I want to get the message out, or I've got to do. But when you're like, I don't know what to talk about. Now, if they're saying, I have 13 ideas and I don't know which one to do first, okay, that's good. But when you're like, when I'm looking for ideas for show topics, that's when I'm like, maybe it's not time to start a podcast just yet. So that's always interesting. Let's see. Justin asks a question. Do you ever work out how many minutes percentage this show features to calculate the sponsorship? I wanted to do that this week and I did not. I know we just did 2 minutes of that. So when I do our awesome supporters, which, you know what, let's just do that now since I got the clock up, and I will start a stopwatch. And so before we move on, let's talk about our awesome supporters. If you go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, you can see some of the awesome supporters there. And there are great people like AIGoesToCollege.com, I Am Salt Lake. We've got the ContentCreatorsAccountant.com, castahead.net, all sorts of great people, voiceovers and vocals.com. You could be part of this slide if you're watching on YouTube. But we want to remind you that this show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting.com, where you get courses, coaching, and community. And if you're not really sure, that comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can use the coupon code COACH when you sign up to save on either your monthly, quarterly, or yearly subscription. And if your show isn't growing, we were talking about that, well, maybe you need some honest, constructive feedback. You can do that by visiting podcasthotseat.com, where you give me an episode, I listen to it, I tell you what's great about it and anything that might need a little work. And then we look at your website, because a lot of times when your show isn't growing, it's because you've made it really hard on your website to follow the show. And then somebody asked a question about Podpage. Well, if you want to check out Podpage, just go to trypodpage.com, or if you want to learn Podpage, go over to learnpodpage.com. Now you can migrate from WordPress into Podpage. That's something that we just announced this week, because a lot of people are like, oh, I'd love to move to Podpage, but I've got 17 years of blogs on my WordPress site. Yeah, we can bring that over. And if you need more Jim Collison, and who doesn't, well, then just go over to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And it's time for this is weird because this is an ad, but it's an activity, and it's an activity that Dave forgot to pull up on his website. So it's time for the Wheel of Names. So who will it be? Will it be Glenn from the Horse Radio Network? Will it be Jody from Audio Branding, or the ladies from Keep the Flame Alive, or the Content Creators Accountant? We're going to spin the wheel, and it is going to be, Shane from Spybrary. If you like James Bond and other spy kind of stuff, now it's kind of interesting, because this is like real spy stuff. Like, you'll talk a little James Bond, things like that. But we're talking real. Just go over to spybrary.com. Tell Shane that Dave sent you, and tell him I said hi. Good guy over there at spybrary.com. And if you are listening to the show right now and you go, hey, did this show save you time, save you money, save you headaches? Did we keep you educated? Did we maybe entertain you? Do I entertain you? Well, then just go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, and you can be an awesome supporter today. So that was 3 minutes and 15 seconds. So if we add 2 minutes from this morning, that's 5 minutes. And so if we we'll say 5 minutes of ads, and if I get my calculator to show up, there we go, 5, and divide that by 90, we end up with, survey says, 0.0055555556. So if we times that by 100 to get the percentage, the survey is 5.5% ads. And the highest I would ever go over or even think about would be 10%. I'm with Dan Granger from, that one company that I can never remember. And holy cow, we got a super chat. Thank you so much, Justin, for that. Deeply appreciated. So 5%. But yeah, to me, I think it should be capped at 10. And there's some shows that start off with, 3 minutes of ads, and the show's only, 10%. It's only 10 minutes long. So that's 30% right there. So it's kind of crazy. When I was at NRB, I was talking to somebody in advertising. They were talking about a true crime show that was 34%. And that to me is just, that's too many. That's a little much there. So keep that in mind. But yeah. Jim, do you have what do you do when ads come up? Maybe that's a question. Do you listen? Because I heard one company come out that said, Dan Granger from Bumper said people don't skip ads. And I'm like, well, they're not monitoring my phone, because when an ad comes on, I cannot get to the skip button, because number one, it's a new show done by a female, and most of her products kind of lean towards either children or females. And so I'm like, yeah. So do you listen to ads, or do you skip them?
Most cases, clicking through 30, 30, 30, 30.
Yeah.
If I've heard them, it depends on the ad. It depends on the person. Depends what I'm doing at the moment. all those kinds of things. But for the most part, on some of the shows, I know these are ads. I know the companies. I'm like, I'm good. 30, 30, 30. Get through them. The Wall Street Journal podcast that I listen to, they do an ad in the beginning and one in the middle and one at the end. And I almost always skip all of them, So that's just I've heard them all. I've heard them all.
Ralph made a point here. He goes, but if the ads are giving you value, and that's it. Tom Webster said, look, if everybody's skipping your ads, here's a novel idea. Make better ads. In the 70s and 80s, we had Where's the Beef? And, I thought the advertisement about colon cancer with all the tight ends in the Super Bowl ad, I thought that was creative and fun. So things like that. I think so many times I got feedback from my audience because I had like 3 ads that I would just kind of rotate in my show. And they were like, we're kind of tired of hearing the same exact ad. Like, we know you're going to talk about the school of podcasting, but can you mix it up a little bit or something like that? Dan says, everyone wants that podcast money or to be a YouTuber because it looks so easy. It's a mixture of creativity and tech, which is a lot of work on both accounts. Yeah, I'm in my talk at NRB, there's a thing on the podcast host where he interviewed like 5 different people that tried YouTube. And one guy was paying, I want to say $300 an episode. And he did it because he thought monetization would be easier on YouTube. And I did my math and I was making $5 CPM on YouTube. So if you get, and that's the thing, you see like where I think the last time I checked, I have 3,200 followers. And what's weird is in podcasting, 3,000 is like, wow, that's a good show. On YouTube, that's minuscule. I have a molecule of a YouTube channel with that kind of stuff. And then you look at it and you see where only 800 people actually viewed the video. And then you look at what you make, and I did the math and I was making $5 CPM. So I would not put the grocery budget on the money that comes from YouTube because A, they can take it away anytime, and B, it's, it fluctuates. And that's I think where you see people burn out because like, I need that YouTube money to pay for gas or something like that. It's like it should, the smarter way is to view it as a distribution channel that's going to get you more exposure to lead people back to whatever the heck you're doing that actually makes money. If you make money on YouTube, that's great. It's extra money, but Ralph says the money hustling coaches are telling people they're going to cash in with zero or little effort. Yeah, just sign up today, 3 easy payments, and you can do that. So there we go. Justin says, going back to the FM AM chat, some of us said we like entertaining ads so they can or could themselves add listener value. That's true. Radio ads used to be better before they were just, In fact, if you listen to ads on the radio, they've put some thought into it. A little sound effect, a little theater of the mind, that whole 9 yards. It's not always, it's always fun when the owner of the business decides he's going to do the ads. Because it's like, hi, this is Bob's from Bob's House of Bathrooms. You need a new bathroom. They're good. You could get it today, 30% off. Just mention that I heard it on a radio, or tell them Bob sent you. And you're like, wait, that's a horrible read. And, that whole 9 yards. So that's always,
Yeah. Dave Garofalo over at Scar Authority, he does his own ads, and many of them, he's had some of them produced. He does many of them. He does them off his phone from his office. You can kind of hear it sometimes. And sometimes they're not very good. They take on, though, a kind of a style of their own, and people love to hate on them. And listen, we see this in the ad space all over the place where, YouTubers try to create controversy during their show to get the comment section rolling, right? They for those YouTubers that are smart, they'll know that those negative comments aren't really bad for them. They're actually good. You got to kind of get through them, right? You got to, there's some of them pretty rough.
Yeah.
If you don't have thick skin, you probably shouldn't be on YouTube. And, but those all that conversation, all that chat creates what the algorithm is looking for, which is what we call engagement, right? And so creating engaging ads doesn't always mean that they're the most positive or the best produced or whatever. He knows for his audience what he can and can't get away with, right? This is the thing with Dave. He's always listening to what's going on around him. What's happening now? What's trending? What can we do? And his ads, like, listen, he's making more than most
Right.
ads, right? And so I would say they're good or bad. You could do that all day long, but he makes more than you do on them. And right, he's figured it out. And so I don't think, the question isn't what's engaging to everybody. The question is what's engaging to your listeners. That's the question you want to ask. What are my listeners going to tolerate from an ad perspective, or what are they looking for from an ad perspective? So you gotta, I don't know, why do we flock to the Super Bowl ads? Right? I mean, everybody, we watch them. We like, a lot of money gets spent on them.
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, this has to be good because they spent, whatever, $500,000 a second.
Yeah, not always.
Not as they used to be. That's where the cancel culture kind of killed, in my opinion, Super Bowl ads. When you're worried about offending everyone, you can't be entertaining. Jokes are at somebody's expense, and so, or I don't know. Like there were some, like the Budweiser ad now used to be funny. Remember when it was the three frogs, Budweiser, those were funny. But now it's a beautiful picture of a horse and a Clydesdale, and at the end you go, oh, that's what they do. There's no real humor, anything edgy. It's always, oh, warm and fuzzy Budweiser. Oh, but it's, I'm trying to think, Amazon had the one where now What's Her Name Plus, which is horrible, by the way. Good old Lexi Plus broke the Pocket Cast app on my Amazon show. So I went back to the old Lexi, but I know they had one where Pete Davidson was talking to it, and that was kind of cute. But yeah, you're right. They're really not that. It's not like, oh, that Super Bowl ad was amazing. Like, no, they just paid a lot of money for it. So
the Budweiser one was good though. Like I cried at the end of that.
Yeah.
The guy says, "Are you crying?" He goes, "I just got something in my eye."
Yeah.
Like that is the best. Like I watched that voluntarily like 6 times. That's the best. Like that ad was kind of written for me, right? From the content that was in it. So some really good ads in there. But yeah, I just think we got to think through our audience. I try to mix up the ads on Home Gadget Geeks a little bit. Coinbase is back in my ad rotation, and so I've been coming up with some different ways to try to do that with the guests that are coming on by including the guests in the ad spot. At the end I say, because it's basically an affiliate play. So I don't say this sponsored by Coinbase. I just say go to theaverageguy.tv/Coinbase. And so it's an affiliate play, but I've been trying the last couple weeks trying to get the guest involved. So we have a little bit of discussion around it, and it doesn't feel so the same, right? Because it's different guests, then they do it differently. They say different things about it. And so just try to mix it up a little bit from, getting the word out.
Randy says, the what's up guys were the best.
That was good.
Was good. Dan says the Super Bowl ads are a nostalgia and legacy thing. People have parties centered around them. It's a whole event like any other holiday. That is true. But it's going to be interesting to see, if they don't put on a good game, that game on one hand was a defensive battle, but if the ads aren't great and the game's not great, that's going to be interesting. Daniel said, did you see Wise Camera response to Ring's now canceled Flock partnership? Yeah, Flock was a company that has license plate reading stuff, and they were going to partner with Wise, so your Ring camera or whoever could help track down. I'm like, that's just a little too close to just being spied on. 24/7, which I know we are, but I just don't want to say it out loud, so that's too funny. Ken has a great question. So, and I think the question here is not if, but when, which is a really cynical thing coming from a guy that runs the School of Podcasting. But he asks, what will kill podcasting? When will it happen? What is the giant meteor that could come? And it's already here. We're kind of talking about it. Too many bad advertisements in a show. And I think because you've got to out deliver value. If you figure value is a +1, a bad ad is a -1. And so when you have too many bad ads and you end up you give somebody an hour of your time and you end up with a -3, that's not going to work. And I'll be interested to see, because I truly believe, I have somebody on my show this week. Actually, it's next week. It's a bummer because I have this great interview. And this is where I've always said the last episode of the month is question of the month, which, by the way, if you haven't answered it, what was a shortcut that you tried and worked? Because we've all tried shortcuts. Or what was something you sacrificed to podcast? Schoolofpodcasting.com/question. I need your answer today, as in Saturday, because we got a really low turnout on this question for some reason. And it's a great way to promote your show. But I knew I shouldn't have done that. As I was doing that, I'm like, you're going to forget what you're originally talking about. What's going to kill podcasting? That, or I don't know that I would ever see this happening, but if I see things moving away from RSS, because again, no RSS, no podcast. Dan says everything will kill podcasting for some people. Simultaneously, nothing will kill podcasting for other people. That's true. Danny says, I'm not sure that that will kill podcasting. It'll kill these podcasts for listeners, but there are plenty of alternatives out there to pick from. That's the cool thing. Dan says, we're still talking about AM radio, and that was invented hundreds of years ago. And then Ralph says, it's about the content sucks. Well, that hasn't killed podcasting, because trust me, there's been bad content for 21 years now. We all tolerate ads if it's giving us value. Podcasting will die when people keep looking to cash in. Well, yeah, that hasn't worked so far. That's where you get the people that do 7 ads or 7 episodes and quit. And Danny says, I'm still waiting on video killing the radio star. It killed the MTV star. And they did that because it was cheaper to do bad TV than make music videos. So, that's a good question though. What really killed MTV? We have a lot of ideas of why we think it did, but I think maybe MTV killed MTV. We just talked about Jim Rome, right? And yeah, he's kind of disappeared a little bit. He chased the money. Is what really killed MTV is they chased the money, right? They chased the reality money for a while, right? Yeah. And kind of lost track of did the lack of pop star, pop music making videos. Like in the 80s, those videos, friends, the videos we watched on MTV were terrible. Like we thought they were great. You go back and look at some of those videos, you think about Van Halen's Jump, right? Okay, for us, that's a big song, right? That video is awful. Like it's them dancing around. It took them a day to make it. It was horribly produced. They had to change the song because they did a bad edit in the video. And so they changed the song so it made sense, right? Those early days of MTV, they were running on a shoestring. Like it was these music folks they would make these videos in a day, and they went, did we get to the point where they were too expensive to make? Did we get to a point where MTV lost its way, right? Some of those kinds of things. So I don't, in some cases, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. Here's the other thing that killed MTV, YouTube. Because now if I want to watch the latest Backstreet Boys video, I don't have to wait for Carson Daly to play it at 3 o'clock or whatever it was. I can just go there and play it. And I think that's part of it. But they abandoned the music person that wanted to turn it on and watch and see their, again, I this is the only place I can see my favorite band until YouTube came along. Yeah. So, but they went into, when the Real World came on, that was really one of the first reality shows. And it was really popular because we'd never seen anything like that. And the problem is you can't recreate that exact thing because the second season of The Real World with new people knew what they were getting into. The first season did not. And so, Uncle Marv says MTV made the same mistake Blockbuster did. They should have become a streaming service. That could be. Mark Ronick from the Empowered Podcasting Conference and Podcast Morning Chat. Not YouTube, social media. Yeah, that could be too. But the fact that before you couldn't.
It's never one thing. It's never one thing, though. It's always a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. And Stephanie says all musicians have to fund their own videos. And if the artists aren't making money at that level, they might not put that money into a huge video. Yeah, it was probably one of those things where the record label's like, we're going to spend $30,000 on your video. And they're like, great. And then they forget to tell them, oh, by the way, you're going to pay us back, with the 11 cents you made on your CD or whatever. So, yeah. But, what's got you?
The 11 cents you made on your CD.
Yeah.
Like that's a phrase. Your CD, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what happened to albums, right? What happened to?
Well,
that's an area advertising. They could have put as we think about ads. These bands could have put giant ads on their albums or their CDs, and they never did.
Well,
that was never an ad space for the most part.
Until Kiss. And then I remember when I bought the Weekend Warriors album, which I could run and get. I got mine signed. But you opened it up, and that's when Ted Nugent was like, hey, I'm popular, and I've got this whole other hunting and bow and arrows and all this other stuff. And he started pimping his hunting stuff. And now that's probably, I'd be interested to see what percentage of Ted's income is hunting stuff, because he's definitely not selling the records he used to, because he keeps repurposing the same. He's like Chuck Berry. He just takes the same song and puts some new lyrics over it and, that whole 9 yards. But I remember you'd open it up and you could get T-shirts and things like that. The inside sleeve, instead of being lyrics, was now an order form that you could fill out and get your merch. So that's so Ken says, so we're going to kill podcasting.
We might.
Yeah,
the
kind of.
Podcasters might kill podcasting, just to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, oh man, Rich says, long live 120 minutes. I didn't like that show, but I totally applaud the fact that they were playing music I'd never heard of. But it was for me. Yeah, Randy says, I was more partial to the Headbangers ball. I got a T-shirt. I met Ricky Rackman at an event. He was selling Headbangers Ball T-shirts, and I'm like, definitely taking that. Yeah. Chris says, Guns N' Roses, November Rain. They might as well have had Fonzie water skiing and jumping a shark in Axl's wedding. Yeah, that was crazy. That was that's the best thing. Go back and watch, especially ones from the 80s, because I think Total Eclipse of the Heart is one where, for no apparent reason, first of all, it's really everything's super white, like just blended out. And like for no reason, a horse just runs through a set and then you'll see a window getting smashed. It was just all these really visual things that had nothing to do with the song. But I remember Axl swimming with dolphins or something in November Rain or whatever, and he's jumping off an aircraft carrier. I was just, Dan says MTV was owned by Viacom in the early 2000s when YouTube was bought by Google. Viacom and Google were founded in completely different industries that just happened to start to overlap. Yeah, that's too funny. When podcasting is no longer fun, when regulations become too onerous, fines and licenses imposed, our new logo icon will become the pod mic with duct tape across the windscreen. Yeah, that could be. That's something that's eluded us. There's no, aside from FTC regulations. So when you hear that person that says, hey, you can make money, just charge people to come on your show, you have to disclose that at the beginning of your show. But if they ever try to put guidelines or, well, there are. I mean, you can't say, I wish we'd go shoot so-and-so in the head. That'll get you kicked off of every platform invented. So that's something else you got to keep in mind. Todd the Gator, we are going back in time. I just saw Styx in concert here in Orlando this week, speaking of past idols. And what they love to say on stage is everything you hear is coming from the stage. They don't have any backup vocals or anything like that. Chris says even the Headbangers ball couldn't pivot properly. They try to get the grungy, and then the existing watchers ran away. Yeah, if you pivot completely away from what you did, you're going to lose your audience if the old audience doesn't like the new stuff. And that's where I always thought it was interesting how the Beatles, if they went from singing, She Loves You, Yeah, 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 to psychedelic stuff and then their later stuff, and their audience was with them all the way. So it's hard when you change things around. Yeah, Chris says Adam's Curry's hair was majestic on Headbangers Ball. Adam spoke at the NRB show, and he had a picture, man, and he had a lion's mane of hair. It was amazing. So something else I wanted to point out, I thought this was funny because this is the perfect snapshot of any kind of all-in-one thing. So in this case, it's Riverside. And so somebody says, hey, don't use Riverside. It's a mess. I'm a total beginner. So right there, pay attention to that, and was ready to pay for the pro plan to have an intuitive platform to record my files, use a simple background noise eraser, and edit my episodes and potentially record episodes with guests. It remained stuck at 97% for my first recording, which was a 30 minutes plus video, and my second recording, which was just 48 seconds. It was simply unusable, not playing, impossible to click on the play button or to edit. Each time I had to do a simple action, I had to send a message to support. I'm surprised by how unreliable the product is. Do you know any intuitive, user-friendly alternatives for super beginners who don't want to spend a lot of time editing? Thank you. I'm surprised he didn't say, and it's free. But what's funny is if you go down, he says it doesn't have a great editor. You're paying for local recording and multiple tracks. And then somebody else says, as an editor, I often receive local audio with clear streaming glitches, and they're not supposed to have that. But if you scroll down, I agree when it works, but when it doesn't, customer service is almost useless. But somewhere down here, I've been using it for over three years now with no real issues. As long as my internet connection has been sound, my browser is correct, it does what it's supposed to do. So in the same thread, you have somebody saying, this thing's a mess, and you have somebody saying, I've been using it for 3 years, it's great. So, and I just remember, as someone who uses Riverside several times a week, no, it's not perfect, but it's not a mess, it might be the user. So in this very long thing, you can just see where somebody's going, works for me, it's a mess. This is awful, I think it's great. And I was like, when I was going through this, I'm like, I got to bring this up today because I think that's the thing when people are trying now to get it to do everything. So it's got to be a host, and it's got to be an editor, and it's got to be a remote recorder. One of those three things is not going to work great. So that's what's always fun. Here we go. Wow, the chat room is still on MTV. Michael Jackson killed the video. He made the best videos and everyone had to spend money to keep up. That's true. So going back to what killed podcasting, how do you save podcasting? What are your thoughts on how to prevent the demise? I do what I do, and you either listen to me or you don't. I say to people over and over, it's been proven in now granted, they're studies of one, but there's two of them now that show that podcasting that audio outperforms video 15-1. We could add a third one. When I drove to Nashville, I did not watch any podcast. I only listened to them. And I just say there's more opportunity to listen. So if you want to do YouTube, do YouTube. I'm just here to say you don't have to. And yet, if you go to Reddit, everybody's like, well, I have to do video. I'm like, no, you don't. So I just keep trying to like hold it like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And I always like, anytime you see a headline from Spotify, go read the fine print and then verify that what they said is happening. Because, my favorite example is when they said you can play music on a podcast. And the true headline should have been, you can play music on a podcast after we approve every episode. And the only people that can hear it will be on the app, not the website, and they're a paying subscriber. It's not quite a cool headline as you can now play music as your podcast, but that's what the actual headline should have been. And just realize that you've got YouTube who changed the view length on a short to be, I don't know, nothing. It could be 0.0003 seconds, and they'll count that as a view. And then they come out and say, we got 200 billion views last, a day. Like, well, of course, because a view is, So I just hold that up and go, hey, maybe we shouldn't, drink every cup of coffee from this guy and that guy. I wonder sometimes about, I'm not going to say the company, but every time I hear results from a certain company, they always, like, they are so YouTube positive. I almost want to go, are you getting paid to say that? Because it sounds like a commercial, So I don't know. What do you think? First of all, Jim, do you think I don't think podcasting is going to die, because I think those that come in to cash in quick. Yeah.
No. Not in a million years.
Yeah.
No. I don't think it needs to be saved, by the way. I don't think I think it's still growing. I think it's still an option. Is it changing? Are we, in every new medium, and we've been talking about this with MTV, right? In every new medium, there's an upping of the bar. And eventually, right, all forms of media consolidate, and they have consolidated. Every single one that has been out there has started dispersed or started local, and they've consolidated into mega groups. That's just the way it works. Anything based on advertising is going to work that way. It's just going to consolidate. You got to get economies of scale, and you've got to get, you got to drive it into a way. If you're going to make money with it, we know this, you got to be efficient with it. You can't be wasteful. That always leads to consolidation. We're in that consolidation mode right now with podcasting. The beauty of podcasting, which is different than radio, which is different than newspapers, different than TV, is the consolidation doesn't leave out the individual, right? In TV, you couldn't just create your own TV station. Well, you kind of could, but it was super, super expensive and really hard to do. Radio is the same way. Yeah, you could kind of do your own local radio thing, but that didn't, that was expensive. Newspapers, same way, right? You could kind of do your own thing, but it wasn't effective. With podcasting and where we are today, the average person can create a really good podcast that can be watched by millions of people, and it's still pretty affordable and it's still pretty effective. I think now, the more production you do, the more expensive it gets. So there's some element to that as well. But the technology for today still allows the average person to come on the platform, do their thing, and get it done. I would contend the other piece of that is that we don't all have to be super high-end productions to get an audience, right?
Yeah.
And make that work. Now, our expectations need to be such that, hey, a couple thousand, that's a pretty good size. That's a pretty good size audience. But that may not meet your expectations or what you're looking for, but it can be done. So I'm not convinced podcasting needs to be saved. I think it's still evolving. I think we've still got some things that are going well with it. I think the market will dictate where we go going forward. Now, your nostalgic view of podcasting, whatever that is, Dave, you and I don't agree on what a podcast is, right? So we laugh about that, right? We disagree about that. I think I think restricting the term podcasting to RSS is fairly nostalgic. I think that's a nostalgic thing that we do, right? Yeah, you may be disappointed in the future with where podcast goes if you hold some nostalgic views, much like those folks who are like, oh, the only kind of, MTV lost it when they stopped doing video. That's a nostalgic view, friends, right? It's a nostalgic view. So I think podcasting will still evolve and change and grow and do different things. It's not dying, not at the moment. I mean,
No.
I think I think we're in the early phases of growth.
Yeah. It'll be.
I don't know if it needs saved.
Yeah, it'll be dying when the number of new podcasters is less than the number of podcasters quitting. Because right now it's flat. It's been flat for a long time. About 350,000 people podcast on a regular basis. Randy, I'm going to get to you in a second. We do have to do this just because I'm tying into what Jim just said and Ralph just said this as well. So we got to do this.
And now it's time for a power rant.
Yeah. Ralph says, but it's not all about audio versus video. How do we move the needle and increase the professionalism in the industry? It's not about professionalism, because I used to listen to a guy that would do a podcast from the bathroom while he was doing his business in the early days, but it was entertaining and it was fun. And I'm here to tell you, brothers and sisters, not every conversation has to be public. Can I get an amen? So many people like, well, I'm talking to my friend and it's a conversation and it's a real conversation. Yeah, but it's also really boring. Like, just because it's a conversation doesn't mean that it's good. I mean, me and my friend talk on probably 3 times a week, and we talk about guitars and we talk about, what it's like getting old and what is, whatever. But like, that's not a podcast. Yeah, it's a real conversation, but he's got one intended target, me, and I've got one intended target, him. And it's like, yeah, you could listen in and it might be entertaining, but the whole thing about, well, I just want to have conversations and have it bring money from heaven because it's a real conversation. Not every conversation needs to be public. Okay, I'm much better now.
You had a little Rush Limbaugh on that one, smacking the table.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me, so anyway, Randy Black has joined us via the Call Me. Yes, you can call in. So Randy, how's it going, buddy?
I am great. How are you, Dave?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, first off, it was a very easy call because I have a permanent button set up on my smart pads to call you. So nice. It's just one of the great features I love now that Rode's done. But there's some stuff was said in the chat, and like one of them was said a little bit ago. I believe might have been Dan said it about being, not making remarkable content. And I know your big push lately, you've talked a lot about making things that are remarkable.
Yeah.
The problem not really the problem, but the bone I pick with you on it is that remarkable is not always good. And we have to remember that anytime we talk about remarkable.
That's a good point.
And I did an episode yesterday I recorded for Randy Unscripted, which is where I just do my rants on things.
All right.
And it was the title of the episode is Remarkable with a question mark. And part of what I said there was, things can be astonishingly good. So like a remarkable act of generosity, a remarkable innovation, a remarkable comeback. But they could also be astonishingly bad.
Yeah, it's true.
So a remarkable failure, a remarkable scandal, remarkable collapse, remarkable lack of judgment.
Hawk to a girl.
Yes. Events in life can be remarkable.
Yeah.
But they can be remarkable because they were outstanding. For example, the Seahawks win the Super Bowl. All right, that was remarkable. They had a great season. Things were great. But a plane crashed. That's remarkable.
Right.
Somebody had a public meltdown. That's remarkable. And we've all had those moments in life where something great's happened and we consider it remarkable. We want it to be remembered. But we also have all had those moments in life where something didn't go right. Something went wrong. Something embarrassed us. Something failed. Those are also remarkable. So we've got to kind of shift our mindset on that a little bit.
Well,
and look at it as it's not a question of, are we doing things that are noticeable, because they can be noticeable for good things, they can be noticeable for bad things, but should we do things that are meaningful?
There you go. Because if you think about it, I think the best example of bad content that got really popular because people were remarking about it, Tiger King. Like that's a bit of a this everything coming together, COVID, we're bored, nothing to watch. And everybody watched Tiger King and was like, this guy's an idiot. You got to watch, like, I can't believe. So it was remarkable. But that's the whole, I think the thing that is missing here is this is why I always say 70% of podcasts are discovered via word of mouth. And the algorithm, the algorithm that people talk about at YouTube. It's like, well, we have that. It's people telling other people about stuff. So you're right. Remarkable can be really good or really bad. So my thing would be for a podcast, I'm hoping it's remarkably good, but it still has to be something that people talk about. So I agree.
Out of the 357,757 people who've published or shows that have published in the last 30 days, hopefully they're making something that's remarkable that for a good reason.
Yeah. That is a good point.
I just pulled that statistic off the Podcast Index. So I'm not going to lie. I'm a geek like that.
Well, where do we find Randy Unscripted?
randallblack.com/unscripted will get you to the page for the show. There's 37 episodes there, and 30 of those were all for Napod Pomo. So that was kind of my Napod Pomo jump in to get started with that. And then I publish stuff once a month or so just to kind of something gets under my skin or I start having thoughts on something and I'll publish something there. Yeah. But before I jump off, I just want to make sure that we all hear one thing very quickly. You ready?
All right.
Pinky, you're so crazy.
Yeah, I can't do that right now with my cold.
My favorite.
It's literally a button on my Stream Deck.
Nice. Excellent.
That is my favorite. Thanks, Randy, for playing.
Yeah,
that's
thanks, buddy.
Quote.
Have a good day, guys. Enjoy the weekend.
We'll see you.
Yep.
All right.
There's some conversation going on in chat about these terms, remarkable or valuable or, popular or whatever. We all come at this from a different set of values of what we're looking for. And so I think sometimes this success or whatever is accidental. You didn't even intend to be that way. And it just came across, that quote that Randy just played, when you did that, I'm not sure you had it in your mind, like, oh, this thing is going to be thing is going to be popular, right? I'm doing this. This is what I'm intentionally doing you just did it. It came from your talent. And then there was a certain group of us who latched onto it and that's a thing. I'm one of those. I love that quote, right? It's my favorite Dave Jackson quote. Favorite thing you've ever done. I smile. It just cracks me up every time I hear it. I sometimes when I see a driver doing something crazy on the road, I quote that in the car. And so, but that's me. Not everybody had that experience that I had, right?
Well, it'll be interesting to see if you get this one. Speaking of catchphrases, do you remember they pelted us with rocks and garbage?
Mm-mm.
That was a Letterman thing. Letterman had this whole thing where we're going to come up with the next who's the beef, what's the beef, or where's the beef, or whatever it was. Yeah. What's the beef would be better for today, probably. But they came up with this contest, and the winning new catchphrase from David Letterman was, they pelted us with rocks and garbage. And my friend said that the other day and about fell out of my chair. And that, again, is a great example of we might both laugh at that because we remember 1984, probably 87, but if we did that on a podcast and they're like, dude, they pounded us with rocks and garbage. Right. And the audience would be going, what? Why isn't this getting 1 million downloads? This is hilarious. We're great. I'm like, Yeah. So that's always tricky.
Yeah, well, it's just so subjective, right? I think maybe that's the word I would use in all of this is subjective. And it may happen in a moment. You may have said it too early or too late, but for me it was right on time. And it worked for me and I think you just got to keep being, and somebody said this earlier, maybe it was you. You just got to keep being you. Be out there, be authentic, be you, be funny.
Craig said, save podcasting by being you. I can't see AI slop replacing genuine, original and good content. Yeah.
I can in some places, by the way. I can see that in some places where it will replace it. But
I heard
maybe not in this kind of stuff, right? Where we're doing what we're doing. Maybe. But
I can see statistics. Because somebody said that like there's an AI slop thing that puts out the weather in Chicago. Like it'd be like, hey, it's, Saturday, February 28th. It's 55 degrees outside in Chicago. And I'm like, yeah, but on the other thing, anything like that, I can probably get from my watch. Like, you know what I mean? Whatever service they're using to say it to me. Sure. And some people like to listen and some people like to watch, no pun intended. But yeah, I was like, well, okay, that's not quite as AI sloppy, but I'm like, do I really need somebody to tell me what the weather is? I'm like, can I just put my arm outside or look at my watch or my phone or whatever? But
maybe you're in a situation where you can't do that. And
yeah,
it's
true.
Need it spoken to you, right?
Yeah.
I kind of think sometimes in podcasting would be a space where the AI knows me well enough. I could, before I go on a drive, I would say, hey, create a podcast about these things. Boom, 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 boom. Now, creating a podcast is probably not the right phrase. Give me some information about, right, that blah, blah, blah. And it would do it back to me in the form of a podcast. So
I think that's coming. They say that's coming, where you just be able to say, I need an 8-minute podcast about this, and then it gives it to you, and you hope that it's correct. So, Jim, what's coming up on the AverageGuy.tv?
Speaking of AI, Jay Franzi joins me. We talk about music creation in the world of AI and what that means for singers and songwriters and creatives in the music space. He's very involved in that, and it has a lot of connections in Nashville. And so we spend a little time talking about the early impacts of AI in the music creation space. Available right now, homegadgetgeeks.com.
And on the School of Podcasting, it is question of the month time. So if you're listening to this live, go to schoolofpodcasting.com/question right now, because I'll start working on that here shortly. And we're asking about, did you take any shortcuts that actually work? Because we know it takes a lot of time, or were there sacrifices that you've done that were worth the sacrifice? So if you're interested in that, that'll be coming out on Monday. And then the week after that, I have a really fun interview coming with Jaina from Big Lash Energy, which might actually be a two-parter. We talked for 2 hours. She had lots of cool stuff. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to the world's greatest chat room. Thanks for the super chats. And we will see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach. Unless, of course, somebody kills podcasting, but that's not going to happen. We'll see you.